Kia ora, everyone, and welcome to this AMA online Saturday morning session. I'm Mala Natraj, President of the AMA, and it is my pleasure to introduce the speakers for the plenary, Cami Sawyer and Kylie Begg. Um, Cami is the mathematics and statistics subject matter expert at the Ministry of Education. She is the leading, she's leading the writing of the updated New Zealand curriculum, mathematics and statistics learning area. And Kylie was a maths and science teacher and HOD for many years. She is a subject matter expert for the maths and statistics area as well for the ministry. Now, they are going to speak about the year 0 to 8 mathematics and statistics learning area. This is such perfect timing because the final version of the 0 to 8 curriculum was released just 2 days ago. So I'm sure everyone is just waiting to hear. But a few Zoom keeping things at first. So just make sure that you put yourself on mute throughout the presentation. And of course, unmute when you do want to speak.
Kia ora koutou, ko Cami Sawyer toko ingoa. I'm Cami, and as the nice introduction said, I've been the lead writer on the refreshed New Zealand maths and stats curriculum almost since the beginning. I wasn't quite there at the beginning, but this has been the work of a large group of people. And right now, like the thank yous and stuff that go out online talk about the most recent writers, but writers and your colleagues and friends and people have been working on this for the past 3 years, and really all their work has gone into this. We've tried to not lose anything from their great thinking, and it's not just been the work of this past year. So I just want to make sure to acknowledge all the people who've worked on this. So again, I'm Cami, and I'll present for part of it. And I'm here presenting with my Ministry of Education colleague, Kylie. Kylie, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks. Kia ora koutou, ko Kylie Begg toko ingoa. Nice to see you this morning. Thanks for joining us on a Saturday morning. The dedication, hey? As Mala mentioned, I have been a maths and stats teacher and a sciences teacher for many a year. And I've taught from year 3 all the way up to year 11 across my career. I've worked internationally and as well as in New Zealand, and I joined the ministry halfway through 2022. And my role there is on the New Zealand Curriculum and Te Whariki team as the maths and stats subject matter expert, the lead advisor. So thanks for having me today. We look forward to sharing, hot off the press document with you. Yeah, over to you, Cami.
So this is Maths and Stats year 0 to 8. We hope to have 9 through 13 out. That still has to go through a feedback phase, but 0 through 8 is now out and ready to be used in schools from the start of next year. So we're very excited about that. We're still using the Mātaiaho kaupapa. It still comes with all the stuff that you've learned about over the last couple of years in the rollout of this refreshed New Zealand curriculum. And you'll see that in the design of this. It's always really important to read the purpose statement. It's kind of the first thing that comes up in the maths and stats part. And it helps us set the setting of why we're learning this, why students are learning this, why is mathematics and statistics important in school. Up at the top of the screen, you see that we have the new whakatoki for the mathematics and statistics area. Ano mehe whare punga were were. Behold, it is like the web of a spider. And this was gifted to us with the idea that mathematics and statistics is this subject that brings together so many different ideas, and it's about creating connections, creating ideas, and it's a beautiful, complicated artwork, really. And so this is the phrase that is used to describe complex, intricate pieces of art. And that's how we see the mathematics and statistics curriculum. And what sets this stage for it is the purpose statement. So I would encourage you to go in and read. It's not very long. I've chosen out some key aspects of the purpose statement here, but I'd encourage you to go and read the whole thing. Understand, know, do weaving, which you have been seeing over the last couple of years as part of the refreshed curriculum. It is through the interweaving of understand, know, and do that students develop their conceptual understanding and procedural fluency, supporting success and bringing richness and meaning to mathematics and statistics for them. So what do we mean by conceptual understanding? It's the deep knowledge of mathematics and statistical concepts, operations, and relations. It's the material that students need multiple opportunities and experiences to build their understanding, to make connections and relate ideas. And as they learn more, they build their conceptual understanding. So what is their early conceptual understanding isn't always what sticks in place. So one of our key ideas of this curriculum is we're building conceptual understanding. We're also building procedural fluency. So procedural fluency is about students choosing procedures appropriately and carrying them out flexibly, accurately, and efficiently. So it's not the same as just memorization of facts and steps. Rather, it's being able to activate what they know and when to use it. So, and that's what we see this understand, know, do weaving enables. So those are our goals. The understand, there's 3 understands for this curriculum. The understands describe the big ideas that students develop from learning mathematics and statistics over phases 1 to 5. They help connect school mathematics and statistics with the wider world and represent the critical big picture concepts of mathematics and statistics. So this isn't the day-to-day teaching, it's not the concepts, it's the big ideas, and they develop and get bigger over time. So here we have that there are patterns and variation, logic and reasoning, and visualization and application. Thanks. The knows, they describe the meaningful and important concepts and procedures in mathematics and statistics. They're broken down into 6 strands: number, algebra, measurement, geometry, statistics, and probability. So from the 2007 curriculum, you'll see we've broken out those strands to really emphasize each part, but also to allow more of that building of that spider web, right? More connections can be created by breaking it apart. The do's, these are these really important processes that students use to represent and work with what they know and understand in mathematics and statistics. So we call these the do processes. These processes are central to how students learn and apply mathematical and statistical knowledge. While there are small progressions in the processes from phase to phase, in general, the increasing sophistication of their use comes from applying them to more advanced concepts and procedures. So we're not saying what the students do changes a lot over time. The questions you ask will depend on the age of the students, but they're all investigating, they're all representing, they're all connecting, generalizing, and explaining and justifying. That happens at every year level for all students. And it gets more complex as the knowledge that they're applying that to gets more complex. There's a section in the curriculum that's just about the structure. It's just setting it out for you, just making sure it's clear to you about how this weaving happens. The words I've just used to describe the understand, know, and do are in this section. And it also tells us about what you're going to find as you go forward in the curriculum, what we'll see in each phase. So the new curriculum is organized into 5 phases of learning, And what we have here with years 0 to 8 is the first 3 phases of mathematics and statistics. At each phase, you're going to see a progress outcome describing what students understand, know, and can do by the end of the phase. So that's kind of a big picture. It goes along with those same understand, knows, do's that we were talking about. There's also an introduction to the teaching sequence, highlighting how to teach during that particular phase. What looks different at phase 1, 2, and 3. And Kylie's going to go in more detail into how we have the teaching guidance structured. And then there's also a year-by-year teaching sequence, highlighting what to teach in the phase along with the teaching considerations for that particular aspect. So there's 3 things you'll see at every phase. This is what those big phase progress outcomes look like. So the color gives you a hint there that you can see the pink is our understand, the green is our know, the gold is our do processes. And for phase 1, 2, and 3, you see that we have a big picture of what that looks like at the end of the phase. So all the little steps of learning is going towards that big learning at the end. And it's organized along the same lines that we talked about from the beginning. The understand stay the same through all 3 phases because that's that bigger knowledge that's being built over time that they'll get to see little glimpses of and build as they go along. The knows is those more concepts and procedures, those change more in each phase. And as we said, the do's kind of stay the same, but they're applying them all the time to all that new knowledge that they're getting. This is what a year-by-year teaching sequence looks like. And again, it appears at each phase, gets a year-by-year teaching sequence. The descriptors for what to teach each year have the STEM informed by prior learning. So that's saying that the teacher is going to use their professional judgment about how to teach it. These judgments are going to be responsive to the prior knowledge, strengths, and experiences that the students in front of them bring to their learning. The year-by-year sequence is organized in line with the strands of the know. So what you see here in front of you is examples from the number. So it's all 6 strands have a sequence, and then they're broken down into substrands. So you can see there that number is broken down into several. You're only seeing a glimpse of 2 of them here. There are more substrands that it's broken into. They describe the incremental teaching required each year as students work towards the progress outcome. The year-by-year content can be viewed both vertically, going up and down, as well as horizontally. So the vertical view, when you're looking at it, helps you think, what am I planning for these students who are at that year in front of me? And the horizontal view allows you to think, well, what came before and what goes after? It's how one concept develops across several stages. And this is to help understand the prior knowledge that students may bring with them, or that you may have to be using your teaching to help build as they're moving into the new material. The new thing that we get to see, you didn't see if you spent a lot of time looking at the previous version that we had published, is we've now have a language of mathematics and statistics section at the end of each year-by-year teaching sequence. And it shows you the language and vocabulary that the students will be learning and using. So this isn't the teacher language and vocabulary. I mean, teachers will be using it as well, but this is the kind of stuff that you might want on your word walls, or that you're using, building the students' vocabulary and their explanations and their reasoning and their reading. There is also a glossary for the curriculum that comes along that helps with the teacher and the words the teachers might find new. And Kylie can talk more to that later. And at this point, I will be passing over to Kylie to talk more on the teaching guidance.
Great, thanks, Cami. Okay, so I have the pleasure now of describing the different places throughout the document where you can find guidance about teaching and learning. So we have the components of a comprehensive teaching and learning program. We have phase-specific teaching practices, and also we have teaching considerations, which support the learning of teaching and learning of specific sequence statements. And I'll go through each of these in a little bit more detail now. So the comprehensive teaching and learning program. Now, this does look a little bit different to the previous draft. We've included 4 different components of a comprehensive teaching and learning program. And it's really important that we consider each of these when designing and planning for teaching and learning. So I'm going to start with positive relationships. It's an extremely important element of a maths and stats program, and we know that students who feel connected, who feel positive and supported are more likely to be able to attend to the learning. Positive relationships support students to take risks, to view mistakes as part of the learning process, and these behaviours lead to successful experiences, which in turn builds confidence. Explicit teaching. There is a lot of research to support explicit teaching as an effective practice for maths and stats teaching. However, just to be super clear, we don't mean that this is the teacher up the front of the room, being the lecturer, being the sage on the stage. We view explicit teaching as a planned and purposeful process. It involves really clear explanation of a concept, procedure, or process using demonstrations and supported by carefully chosen representations, including materials. Explicit teaching is really interactive. There's a lot of back and forth throughout as the teacher uses prompts and questions and the students' own ideas to support the explicit teaching and help the students make connections. Explicit teaching also includes opportunities for students to practice, so that important time to practice and to consolidate concepts and processes. And they will do this both in groups, together with the teacher, and independently. And they're developing that fluency and revisiting and consolidating their prior learning. I'll talk now about rich tasks. So we know that investigation, exploring rich tasks, and problem solving are extremely important learning experiences in mathematics and statistics. Rich tasks are meaningful and motivational tasks that are sometimes described, we call them low floor, high ceiling. So they have an entry point that can include every student. Rich tasks could connect to the school community. They should connect to students' prior learning experiences. They could connect to students' cultures and languages, and they could also connect to a purely interesting mathematical situation or statistical situation. In terms of how you would use rich tasks in your teaching and learning programs, they could be used as a motivational hook, or they could be used as an experience to encourage the application and transfer of concepts and procedures that they've learned through explicit teaching. Teachers should plan to use rich tasks and explicit teaching in a dynamic way, so backwards and forwards with rich tasks and explicit teaching in order to deepen and extend learning. The communication in mathematics and statistics. Students and teachers are communicating throughout every experience, I think, in a classroom, both in order to learn new ideas, as well as to share, extend, and clarify thinking and reasoning. Planning opportunities for students to collaborate together and with the teacher to explain and question and critique and connect ideas is really pivotal. Teachers encourage students to develop and use mathematical and statistical language and vocabulary, and also, of course, notation to share their reasoning. Okay, planning. So a really good place to start with planning, using this document to help with planning, is, as Cami mentioned, to look at the progress outcome for the phase that you're teaching within. And this will really help you understand what your students are working towards. I like to view the sequence statements. So when we say sequence statements, we mean each individual row on the teaching sequence. So you'd look at the year 4 sequence statements. So the rows of the year 4 sequence statements, for example. So each one of these sequence statements is a stepping stone that students take towards the progress outcome, if that makes sense. So have a look at the progress outcome for the students for the year levels that you're teaching within. So if you're teaching year 4, 5, or 6, you would be looking at the phase 2 progress outcome. If you're teaching year 7 and 8, you would be looking at the phase 3 progress outcome. So the progress outcome for your students, but also the progress outcome that came before. So what would the students understand, know, and do by the end of that phase that they've already experienced? From there, we can use the sequence for your year level to map out a coherent year program or a long-term plan. And you are using the sequence statements for your year level, for your students' year level. Over the course of the year, teachers should plan to teach every sequence statement for that year level to every student. And then we're thinking about making units of work that are ordered to build on and extend prior learning. So with those sequence statements for your year level, it's certainly not intended that these statements are taught individually, one by one, or consecutively in the order that they're written. Instead, we are aiming to plan units of work that combine statements together in ways that connect and support each other. So just to give you a few little examples, you would most likely teach many of those number structure statements together. You would most likely teach some of those number operation statements with some rational number statements. It's a really nice idea to combine learning about 2D shapes, so those geometry statements, with perimeter and area. That could be a nice combination. So we're looking at ways that we can connect and combine sequence statements to be taught together. It's also a really great idea to plan to revisit statements over the course of the year to really give students multiple opportunities to learn and consolidate some of these sequence statements. We're aiming to take an inclusive approach to planning, which involves using formative assessment information to plan an entry point for each new unit or each new learning experience that all students can access. And this could be the use of familiar contexts or familiar numbers and prompting recall of previous learning and procedures that students have already experienced. For students who have not yet developed the prior learning for a specific sequence statement, teachers can plan to use accelerative approaches to help them with their readiness to learn those year level statements. And accelerative approaches could include targeted small group explicit teaching, the use of verbal and visual prompts, the use of representations and materials, and of course some fluency practice. Further really important points in this planning guidance is around using flexible grouping, so making your groups of students based on the purpose of learning rather than these fixed ability groups, and also using digital tools and technology that can enhance teaching and learning. Okay, the maths and stats lessons. So we know that teachers of year 0 to 8 are now planning for 5 hours a week dedicating to teaching and learning in mathematics and statistics. Depending on the purpose of the learning, the structure of a 60-minute lesson could be planned in 3 parts. So we have the getting started, like the introduction, where you're giving students a chance to recall and connect with their prior learning. It could be a game, it could be a little bit of practice at the beginning of the lesson related to learning that's already been done. We have working time, where students might be working as a whole class, they might be working in groups or pairs. And then we have a chance at the end of the lesson to connect and reflect on the learning and summarize the learning from the lesson. Ideas for experience, so more ideas for experiences that could be included in each section of a lesson are here. So you can, take a chance to read through some of those to see what would work for your students. So you'll notice quite a big difference if you did have a chance to look at the previous draft. This is probably one of the biggest differences. We've added what we're calling teaching considerations. In the previous draft, they were called teaching methods, and we took quite a bit of feedback that teachers would like more examples about what the statements would look like in action and how they could be taught, rather than just, as we had in the previous version, it was more about useful representations. So these teaching considerations are actually structured around the do, mathematical and statistical do processes. So you'll see the words here that are in bold are the do words. These are the mathematical and statistical processes. And they are ways that the teacher can use these processes to teach specific sequence statements. So for example, you'll see that we've suggested connections that could be made with other concepts or other strands. You'll see that we have mentioned useful representations that could really draw out underlying patterns or structures or be supportive for students' learning of these specific statements. You'll see we've listed some possible investigations into concepts or where there would be important explanations or demonstrations. So these considerations are aimed to support teachers to plan explicit teaching, to plan rich tasks, to think about opportunities for communication, and of course, to encourage positive relationships with mathematics and statistics. Oh, there we go. We have a little bit more detail here so you can see. Now, here's something that we wanted to point out. If you're looking at the mathematics and statistics learning area document on a single page version, for phase 1 and 2, because there are 3 year levels, these teaching considerations go over onto the next page. So yeah, I guess the teaching considerations pages need to be held right up against side by side with the previous page, if that makes sense. So you can read across there. Right, just checking that you know where to find a copy of the final version. It is on Tahurangi. This is what the page looks like, and you can look at it in 2 different ways. The first way is to look at the HTML version, and this is where you would use these little quick links, these little bookmarks to pop down to the various sections of the document. You can look at the phase-specific documents on these little bookmarks across the top here. Or, and this is my personal preference, you could scroll down the page and find these little these little documents, and these are the download versions. And I recommend that if you're printing, you find the single page version. And if you want to look at it online, that you look at the spreads version, the double page version. That's the easiest way to view it. And I've just popped the link here as well. And Cami and I will be, of course, sharing these slides with AMA, so you can, take a look at them at your leisure. So those were my key points, really. Thanks for listening. I hope that shed a little bit of light for you on the document. Cami, do you have some last thoughts there?
Yeah, I've been just reading the chat and just some things we want to, people would like us to reiterate. Sorry. So one of the questions is just why have we switched to year levels in years instead of levels? So the whole curriculum has changed to the phase approach instead of the curriculum levels approach. And that's part of just trying to keep and make it more clear what needs to happen within each phase. And so that's why we have those big phase outcomes. So what should happen by the end of 0 to 3, but we don't want people to wait till 3. And, you don't want the 1 and 2 teachers to say, well, I don't have to worry about that because they'll learn it in year 3. The idea is that there's progressive learning that needs to happen over all the years, or at 7 and 8. That students need to learn stuff at both year 7 and year 8. And you can't just leave it all till the end. And so by the sequence statements, we've broken it down to the year to what should be taught. The other thing is that this curriculum is in response to the Royal Society report that came out in 2021. And if you haven't read it, it makes a kind of interesting read. You can Google it, the Expert Advisory Panel on Mathematics and Statistics report. And they really looked at all the evidence that is looking to see why do we have relatively poor mathematics and statistics results in New Zealand compared to international benchmarking, and how can we address that? And they gave us some real clear things that we need to do to address it. And we need to address slippage, which slippage is where students are just falling behind. Once students get behind, we show that they never catch up. And by not giving them the chance to learn at the year level that they are, we encourage the slippage. And the other thing is our system has a lot of inequity in it. And this year level learning won't necessarily fix it, but it's saying every student has a right to be taught their year level work. So in response to the Royal Society recommendations, we've tried to clarify what opportunities students need to be given to learn in each year. And it's to ensure all students are learning appropriate concepts, procedures, and processes in the appropriate year of schooling. And we know this is a big change for New Zealand. We know that, since 2007, we've been dealing with curriculum levels, and we've been dealing with the big range of learning. And so we realize this is a big change. The ministry has 4 days of professional learning that every 0 through 8 teacher will have access to over the next 2 years. And in those days, we'll spend a lot of time helping to think about what are those strategies to help teach kids at the appropriate year level. One of the things that you guys rightly pointed out is that Kylie already brought up is the accelerated practices. And Kylie, somebody asked that you repeat what you said because you said it so nicely and you explained what they might be. But then we also just want to say that the ministry will be coming out with, we have a whole program of work around accelerated practices in both mathematics and literacy. But Kylie, will you just repeat what you said or expand on what you said about accelerated approaches?
Sure. I am also going to give a shout out to a program called Accelerating Learning in Mathematics. This is a program whereby the teacher is supported by a mentor, so a mentor from a provider, and the mentor works with the teachers to help identify students who are in need of some acceleration in learning. And when we say acceleration, we mean learning at a faster rate than what would be a usual expectation. It doesn't mean pushing up ahead. It means bringing kids to the point of readiness for the year level material. Sorry, I said kids, for students, bringing students. And ALIM is a really, it's a really supportive program. So the mentor works with the teacher to identify the students and then to design some really tailored intervention to support those students to accelerate in their learning. I'll put the link on the chat actually when I stop chatting so that you can find out more information about it. I believe there are some places open for next year if you're interested in finding out more about that. So ALIM, but the back to the practices that I mentioned, I talked about targeted small group explicit teaching. I talked about visual and verbal prompts, about the use of, different materials or representations. So teaching in using a slightly different approach that you may have used with the whole class. And I talked about fluency practice. Yeah. To really, master those basic facts that could be super, super useful. Thanks, Cami. Yeah.
Another question was about some careful person is noticing that we don't have highlighted cells in the teaching sequence that we had in the previous version. And that's because the highlighted cells were supposed to they were supposed to indicate some like checkpoints, really, like where you needed to possibly use some of these accelerated practices. But that's not how they were being interpreted by people. We were hearing a lot of limiting to teaching less material, and the truth is that they were something that came from earlier versions. They came from really the literacy and English curriculum, where there's much more research to show that there's time-bound places where students need to have learned stuff. And if you're doing your literacy training now, you have probably learned more about that. We do not have that same kind of research in mathematics and statistics. So it was just concerning sending that messaging without having that strong research. But we will be looking at what the research is out there, and through the ministry's assessment team, we will be sending out messages around how can we look at catching those students early to make sure that we keep them progressing, and so that students can be successful at their year. Another person put something in about mastery. We're not using the word mastery anymore. That was something that came from, early kind of early speeches, and it was being misinterpreted as, kind of holding kids back until they had mastered something. And that's not what was intended by it. If you look at the mastery program in England, which is one of the main ones that uses that, they use it other places, but it's not about holding kids back. But we want to keep giving kids chances to learn and have more opportunities. And again, in mathematics, there's just not a lot of research saying holding them at a place until they learn a concept will help them get there. The idea is to give them more learning experiences, have more opportunities, and sometimes that can then be using those accelerative practices, using those other methods. We can bring them up rather than holding them back. Yeah. So that's our goal.
Yeah, and I'm just going to chip in there and just make, clarify that the sequence for each year level, it's the teaching sequence. So it's what students are being taught and what students are having an opportunity to experience. It's definitely not a list of achievement or a mastery list of what kids must be able to do or understand. It's what is going to be taught to students as a stepping stone on the way to that progress outcome at the end of the phase, where students, are going to be understand, knowing, and doing these elements of the progress outcome at the end of each phase. So the teaching sequence, definitely not an assessment checklist. It's what's going to be taught and what students are going to be learning about and having an opportunity to experience. And we're not limiting opportunities for certain groups of students. Yeah, thanks.
Great clarification. Thank you. Mala, over to you.
You have answered almost all the questions on the chat, but if there are any more questions, now is the time to ask. Unmute and ask now if you'd like to, or you can put it on the chat. Yeah. I'm not.
The only thing, I don't know if other people, I struggled when Kylie was talking about explicit teaching and what is explicit teaching and what isn't, because she was being, there was some disturbance on the line at that point. I don't want to put words in Kylie's mouth, but it's, it's that notion that the explicit teaching is not different from, it's not about just teachers communicating to students, right? It's really about that interaction, and explicit teaching happens during rich tasks as well. It's, and it's that we need, those are the changes we need to see in New Zealand. We need students knowing what was the purpose of what they were learning, not just having a fun activity, but at the end, having a fun activity. We want them to have those positive relationships with maths, but then at the end, making it really clear, why did we do this learning? What was this learning about? What was the purpose? How does it connect back into your learning and the bigger picture? And that's what being explicit is really about.
The clarity and the scaffolding that goes with it, so students are able to access that section of the curriculum. Thanks, Cami. There is a question about
There's questions about
how
assessment, I know, which is
assessment.
not really our area. I mean, we've both madly been working on the content. We do know that from year 3 that there will be twice yearly assessments using either PAT or ASTOL. That's kind of all I know about it. And yeah, right. And that's from year 3 onwards.
Yeah. And in old language, if someone is teaching a class with students, curriculum level 1 to 4 is the same room, what should they do? Some guidance there?
Well, I mean, so there's a wide variety of classes in New Zealand. I mean, so you might be teaching curriculums levels 1 to 4 because you have year 1 to 8 students in the same classroom. You know, there are, but if you're teaching levels 1 to 4 because, and you only have, you know, say a year 5 class in front of you, then you should be teaching the year 5 statements. And you're using those accelerative practices. You're looking at the horizontal statements and you're seeing where they come from. And you're saying, okay, maybe they're not quite ready to, you know, work with 100,000s right now. But what happens if we talk a little bit about 10,000s and then build to the 100,000s? Because I know that's what they should be doing at this year level. So you're working to that student, to the year level. And if you're in a multi-level classroom, which, you know, still, you know, many people will have, you know, years 4 and 5 in the same class, or 3 and 4 in the same class. And then you are having to separate that out. But again, having these sequence statements that shows you that connection, and it can be really clear to you then how to differentiate what your year 3s are doing from what your year 4s are doing.
Yeah. And I've been working very diligently to try and make some planning exemplars, which we hope to be able to share soon. And I've tried to think of a range of contexts, including multi-level classes. So some examples of what a plan for a multi-level class might look like. But honestly, as Cami mentioned, if you follow the row across all of the year groups, so if you take any given sequence statement and follow it across, you'll see that it's an articulation of a concept. So when you're designing a plan, even if you have, you know, multiple year groups in one class, hopefully you could teach around the same concept, but it's articulated for those different year groups, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask Gillian to thank you properly, but to say thank you from me. You know, it is a really useful thing that you clarified everything from explicit teaching to accelerated learning and the communication, vocabulary, and, you know, the understand, know, do, the big ideas. Thank you so much. And if people have any more questions, they can put it in the chat. And over to you, Gillian, because I'm conscious of the time as well. People have to get to the next presentation.
Okay, I can't thank you enough, Cami and Kylie. Sorry. I think that really clarified a lot of things for us. I've read lots of that, but it's really lovely to hear the oral sort of stuff going on and knowing where the changes are as well. So I don't have to go back to 2 documents all the time, start working with this document. And hopefully our primary colleagues who are here today have really learned something. And I know as a secondary person, I'm looking forward to apparently at the end of the month. Yay, that will be terrific. So I want to thank you both very much for coming out on Saturday, and to thank all the participants as well. It is a wonderful thing, I think, to be able to have a cup of tea. And I even saw somebody eating their breakfast. Wonderful that we are actually able to take part in these from all over the country. And people did come from all over the country. And so I can't exhort you enough, people, to tell everyone about these so they can come and experience them too, but know that they can also get this wonderful exposition about the 0 to 8 curriculum. To get that, it's being recorded and it will be available to your fellow colleagues and yourself if you need to go back through anything. I'm sure that if you have any questions as the days go by, there will be somebody to help you